My family didn't just reject me, they sent me a cheap invitation to my own brother's wedding with my husband's name missing. On purpose. You're not good enough, Bianca. That's what my mother said when I married the man I loved. Because he was poor. I watched my brother marry the woman my parents approved of, while I sat alone in my tiny apartment, holding an invitation that made it clear I didn't belong. They thought money was everything. The last time I saw my family, they were laughing at my husband's second-hand suit. My mother's final words to me that night, "When you're ready to live in the real world, let us know." They excluded me because I was poor. But poverty wasn't my destiny, it was just my beginning. My name is Bianca, and this is my story. I remember the exact moment I knew I was no longer part of my family. It wasn't a dramatic shouting match or a slam of a door. It was quiet. It was an envelope. A thin, plain envelope, cheap and flimsy in my hand, with my name and address written in my mother's perfect, loopy cursive. I stood in the foyer of our small, cramped apartment, the afternoon sun slanting through the window, and I stared at it. I didn't open it right away. I just held it, feeling the weight of it, or rather the lack of weight, a knot already forming in my stomach. I hadn't heard from my mom in 3 weeks, not since I'd told her I couldn't be a bridesmaid in my brother's wedding because we couldn't afford the dress. Let me back up a little so you can understand. My name is Bianca, and for 26 years I was a Carter. My brother Liam was 2 years older than me. Growing up, we were thick as thieves. We built forts in the living room, shared a bucket of popcorn at the movies, and he'd always pretend not to notice when I stole the last of his Halloween candy. He was my protector, my annoying big brother, my friend. My parents, Margaret and Robert, were the picture of suburban success. Dad was an architect, Mom was a force of nature on the local school board and the country club's social committee. We had the nice house, the nice car, the nice life. And for a long time, I felt like I belonged in that nice picture. Our house was a colonial revival on a tree-lined street where every lawn was perfectly manicured and every driveway held a car less than 3 years old. My father designed it himself, every detail carefully planned, from the crown molding in the dining room to the bay window in the kitchen where my mother displayed her collection of crystal. Sunday dinners were sacred. We'd gather around the mahogany table, my father at the head, my mother at the foot, and Liam and I across from each other. The conversation was always polite, always measured. We talked about grades, about sports, about college plans. We never talked about feelings. We never talked about fears. We never talked about anything real. I learned early that appearances mattered more than truth. When I was 12, I came home crying because a girl at school had teased me about my second-hand backpack. My mother sat me down, not to comfort me, but to explain that if I wanted to fit in, I needed to look like I belonged. The next day, she took me to the mall and bought me a brand-name backpack, even though I knew money was tight that month. "Perception is reality, Bianca," she told me. "Remember that." I remembered. I remembered it when I carefully curated my friends, when I joined the right clubs, when I laughed at jokes I didn't find funny just to be liked. I became an expert at wearing masks, at being whoever I needed to be to fit into the perfect picture of the Carter family. But underneath the mask, there was always a small, quiet voice wondering if anyone would love the real me if they ever saw her. Then I met Mateo. Mateo was everything my family wasn't. He was loud, passionate, an artist who painted murals on the sides of buildings and talked with his hands. He had a thick head of curly black hair and a smile that could light up a room. I met him at a coffee shop near the school where I worked. He was there sketching, his table covered with papers and charcoal sticks. I spilled my coffee trying to squeeze past him, and instead of being annoyed, he just laughed, a deep, rumbling laugh that made everyone in the shop turn and smile. "Don't worry about it," he said, handing me napkins. "Coffee stains add character. Now your jeans have a story to tell." I looked down at the brown stains spreading across my thigh. "I don't think this is the story I wanted to tell." He laughed again. "Sit down, let me buy you another one. Consider it an apology for being in your way." I sat. We talked for 3 hours. He told me about growing up in a big, chaotic family in Miami, about his grandmother who taught him to paint, about his dream of creating art that would make people feel something. He told me his father was a janitor and his mother worked at a laundromat. They didn't have much, but they had love. So much love. I told him about my careful, measured childhood, about my perfect parents, about the constant pressure to be someone I wasn't sure I wanted to be anymore. He listened like he had all the time in the world, like nothing was more important than my words. When I finally left, my coffee long empty, he asked for my number. I gave it to him without hesitation. My parents met him once. Once, it was at a family barbecue. Mateo, trying his best to fit in, started talking about a new community arts project he was working on in the less affluent part of town. My father listened with a tight, polite smile. My mother's smile was even tighter. I saw her eyes flick over his worn-out sneakers, his paint-stained fingernails, his old truck parked at the curb. The conversation was stilted, and afterwards in the car, the silence was deafening. "He's very different, Bianca," my mom had said, her voice carefully measured. "He's real, Mom," I'd replied, my own voice tight. "Real is one thing," she said, staring out the window. "Real and poor is another. You need to think about your future, about the kind of life you want to build. He can't give you the life you're used to." I wanted to build a life with someone who made me laugh, who saw me, who loved me without conditions. Money didn't matter, but I didn't say that. I just stared out my own window and watched the perfect houses slide by. Liam, to his credit, tried. He came over to our apartment once, watched a game with Mateo, and was perfectly friendly. But I could feel the distance. He didn't invite us to join him and his friends for drinks. He didn't suggest double dates with him and his new girlfriend, Chloe. Chloe, who was perfect. Chloe, who had gone to the right schools, whose father was a lawyer, who wore pearls and smiled with all the warmth of a mannequin. Chloe, who my mother adored from the very first moment she met her. I remember the first time Liam brought Chloe home for Sunday dinner. She arrived with a bottle of wine that cost more than my weekly grocery budget and a story about her father's recent victory in a high-profile court case. My mother hung on every word. My father nodded approvingly. Even Liam seemed to sit taller, prouder, basking in the glow of her perfection. I sat across from her, pushing my food around my plate, feeling invisible. When she finally acknowledged me, it was to ask what I did for work. "I'm a teacher's assistant," I said, "at a public elementary school." Her smile didn't waver, but something flickered in her eyes. "How rewarding," she said, in the same tone someone might use to say, "How unfortunate." "I've always admired people who work with children. It must be so fulfilling, even if it doesn't pay well." Even if it doesn't pay well. The words hung in the air. My mother laughed lightly, as if Chloe had made a joke. My father changed the subject, and I sat there, clutching my fork, feeling the first stirrings of the resentment that would eventually grow into something much darker. So, when Liam and Chloe got engaged after 2 years of dating, the family machinery whirred into action. It was the wedding of the year, at least in my mother's mind. It was going to be at the country club, of course. 500 guests. A 12-piece band. A sit-down dinner with 3 forks, and I was asked to be a bridesmaid. I said yes, of course. I was the sister of the groom. It was my place. But from the very first dress fitting, I felt like a square peg being forced into a round hole. The dresses Chloe picked were a pale, sickly pink chiffon that made me look washed out. They were also $2,000. $2,000 I didn't have, working as a teacher's assistant at a public elementary school while taking night classes to get my master's. Mateo and I barely made rent each month. $2,000 was more than we spent on food for an entire year. I mentioned this, hesitantly, to Chloe at the fitting. She just blinked her big, blue eyes. "Oh, but it's the designer, Bianca. It's what Liam wants. The aesthetic is very important." She said it like I was a child who couldn't possibly understand. My mother, who was there, just gave me a look. "We can help, sweetie," she said, but her voice was cool, and I knew what that help would cost me. It would be another tally mark in the long list of things I owed them, another reason I was a disappointment, another reason they could hold over my head. The tension started to build. At the bridal shower, I made a comment about the cost of the flowers, $50,000 on peonies flown in from Europe. Imagine what that could do for the school's art program, I'd said to my cousin, Sarah, under my breath. Of course, Chloe overheard. Her eyes welled with tears, and my mom spent the next hour shooting me daggers. The breaking point came at the rehearsal dinner. I'd brought Mateo. He was my date. It was my right. He wore the only suit he owned, a nice navy one he'd bought at a thrift store for his gallery openings. It was slightly too big in the shoulders, but he looked handsome. He always looked handsome to me, but he stuck out like a sore thumb. When the toast was made to the happy couple and everyone was talking about their ski trips to Aspen and their summer homes on the Cape, Mateo tried to join a conversation about travel, mentioning a backpacking trip he'd taken through Southeast Asia, staying in hostels and eating street food. The silence that followed was brutal. My dad coughed into his napkin. Chloe's mother, a woman with helmet hair and a permanent sneer, turned to someone else and started talking loudly about a charity gala. Later in the parking lot, my mom cornered me. Her face was pale with anger. "How could you do this to your brother, Bianca?" "Do what?" I asked, honestly confused. "Bring my husband to his wedding rehearsal?" Mateo and I had eloped 6 months earlier, a quiet ceremony at City Hall with just his parents and my cousin Sarah. We couldn't afford a wedding. My parents hadn't spoken to me for a month after they found out. "You know what I mean," she hissed. "He's not like us. He makes everyone uncomfortable. This weekend is about Liam and Chloe. It's not about making a social statement." I was stunned. "A social statement? Mom, I love him. He's my husband." "Husband?" she scoffed. "You eloped like a couple of teenagers. You didn't even give us a chance to." She trailed off, shaking her head. "You're 26 years old, Bianca. It's time to be realistic. You're barely making ends meet, you're chasing some impractical degree, and now you're married to a man who paints walls for a living and can't even afford a proper suit. Think about your family's reputation. Think about Liam." I felt a hot, sharp sting behind my eyes. "Liam is my brother. He's supposed to be happy for me, for us." My mom just shook her head, her expression a mixture of pity and frustration. "Grow up, Bianca. When you're ready to live in the real world, let us know." She turned and walked back inside, her heels clicking on the pavement, each click a nail in the coffin of my relationship with my family. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to Mateo, staring at the ceiling, replaying every small slight, every cool glance, every whispered conversation that stopped when I entered a room. I'd felt like an outsider in my own family for years, but this was different. This was a declaration. Mateo stirred beside me. "You're still awake," he murmured. "I can't stop thinking," I whispered. He turned over, propping himself up on one elbow. "Talk to me." I told him everything. The dress, the flowers, the conversation in the parking lot. The way my mother looked at me like I was a stranger. The way my father wouldn't meet my eyes. The way Liam seemed to be drifting further and further away. When I finished, Mateo was quiet for a long moment. "You know I love you, right?" he finally said. "I know. And you know that I'll support you no matter what you decide?" I nodded. "Then here's what I think," he said gently. "I think you need to do what's right for you. Not for your mom, not for Liam, not for me, for you. If being in that wedding is going to make you miserable, don't do it. If going as a guest feels better, do that. But whatever you choose, I'm with you." I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt a surge of love so strong it almost hurt. Here was a man who asked nothing of me except to be myself. Here was a man who saw my worth, not my bank account or my social connections. Here was a man who loved me, even when we had to choose between buying groceries and buying paint for his next project. The next morning, I called my mom. My hands were shaking. "I can't do it," I said. There was a long pause on the other end. "Can't do what, Bianca?" Her voice was icy. "The wedding. I can't be a bridesmaid. I can't stand up there next to Chloe, pretending everything is fine, while you all look at me and Mateo like we're a problem to be managed. We can't afford the dress. We can't afford any of it." "Bianca, you're being dramatic. It's one day. We already offered to help with the dress. Put it on, smile for the pictures, and you can go back to your life on Monday." The way she said "your life" made it sound like a contagious disease. "No, Mom, I'm not. I'll come as a guest. I'll be there for Liam, but I can't be in the wedding party. I can't pretend." I heard her take a deep, shaky breath. "You're making a mistake. You're choosing him over your family." "I'm not choosing anyone over anyone," I said, my voice cracking. "I'm just choosing not to be humiliated anymore, not to be reminded that I'm not good enough because I don't have money." She hung up on me. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of silence. No calls from my dad. A few texts from Liam, short and clipped, asking if I was okay, but when I tried to call him, he was always busy. I'd sent him a long email, trying to explain, apologizing for the timing, but telling him I loved him and I'd be there for him. He never replied. And now, this envelope. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out the thin card inside. It was a wedding invitation. A simple, printed invitation, nothing like the elaborate ones I knew Chloe had sent to everyone else. It was addressed to me, only me. Miss Bianca Carter, not Bianca and Mateo, not Mr. and Mrs. Mateo Reyes, just me. Miss Bianca Carter, as if I was still single, still living in their world, still waiting for their approval. Mateo's name wasn't on it. I flipped it over as if his name would be magically written on the back. It wasn't. I looked at the RSVP card. It had one line for one guest. It had a little checkbox next to accepts with pleasure and declines with regret. My chest felt tight, like someone was sitting on it. This wasn't an oversight. This was a message, a loud, clear, brutal message. They weren't just excluding Mateo. They were excluding me. They were telling me that because I had married a poor man, I was no longer welcome. Not as a family member, not even as a guest. I was just another name on a list they could check off, and they couldn't even be bothered to print a nice invitation. I didn't cry. I just stood there, staring at the invitation. The cheap, thin, ugly lie. For a moment, the hurt was so huge, so all-encompassing, I couldn't breathe. It was a physical pain, a hot, sharp ache right in the center of my chest. My brother, my parents, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. They had drawn a line in the sand, and they had put me on the wrong side of it because my husband didn't have money. Mateo came home an hour later, finding me still sitting on the floor, the invitation clutched in my hand. He sat down next to me, his brow furrowed with worry. I didn't say anything. I just handed him the card. He read it. His jaw tightened. He didn't say, "I told you so," though he could have. He didn't get angry. He just pulled me into his arms and held me while I finally, let the tears come. They weren't sad tears. They were angry tears. They were the tears of a person who had just been told they didn't belong because they weren't rich enough. "We don't need them," he whispered into my hair. "We have each other, that's all that matters." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that love was enough. But deep down in the darkest part of my heart, a seed was planted. A seed of something that would grow and grow until it consumed me. I wanted to prove them wrong. I wanted to show them. I wanted to be so successful, so rich, so powerful that they would have to crawl back and beg for my forgiveness. I wanted to throw their judgment back in their faces. I wanted them to see Mateo, my poor, wonderful Mateo, and know that they had been wrong about him. Wrong about us. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let their rejection destroy me. I was going to let it fuel me. The wedding came and went. I didn't attend. I couldn't. The thought of walking into that room, alone, while they all looked at me with pity and judgment, was more than I could bear. I sent a card, polite and distant, wishing them well. I never heard back. The next few years were a blur of work and sacrifice. Mateo and I had a fire in our bellies that nothing could extinguish. He kept painting, but he also started taking on commissioned work, portraits for wealthy families, murals for corporate lobbies. His talent was undeniable, and slowly, word started to spread. I finished my master's degree and got a job as a full-time teacher, but I didn't stop there. I started tutoring on weekends, then creating curriculum materials that I sold online. It started small, a few dollars here and there, but then it grew. Teachers loved my materials. They shared them. They recommended them. Within 2 years, I had a small online business selling lesson plans and educational resources. We reinvested every penny. We lived in the same tiny apartment, drove the same old car, ate the same simple meals. But every night we sat at our kitchen table and planned. We dreamed. We schemed. I remember one night late, when we were both exhausted from working double shifts, Mateo looked at me across the table and said, "What if we fail?" I thought about it for a moment. Then we fail. But at least we tried. At least we won't spend the rest of our lives wondering what could have been. He smiled, that beautiful smile. "That's why I love you, you're not afraid." But I was afraid, I was terrified. Not of failing, but of succeeding and still feeling empty. Not of poverty, but of wealth that couldn't buy back what I had lost. Mateo's big break came when a tech startup commissioned him to paint a massive mural in their headquarters. The CEO loved it so much that he introduced Mateo to other founders, other CEOs, other people with money to spend on art. Soon, Mateo couldn't keep up with the demand. He hired assistants. He rented a studio. He started getting written up in art blogs and local magazines. I remember the first time his work was featured in a major publication. We sat on our tiny couch, staring at the article on a laptop, and he started to cry. "I did it," he whispered. "I actually did it." I held him and cried with him. We had come so far, we had sacrificed so much, and now, finally, it was paying off. My business exploded when a major educational publisher noticed my materials and offered me a contract. Suddenly, I wasn't just selling a few downloads a week. I was writing full curriculum packages, getting royalties, being invited to speak at conferences. I remember standing at a podium in front of 500 educators, talking about innovative teaching methods, and thinking about the girl who couldn't afford a bridesmaid dress. The contrast was almost too much to process. We were still careful, we still saved. But for the first time in our lives, we weren't worried about money. For the first time, we could breathe. 5 years after that thin, cheap invitation arrived in the mail, Mateo and I sat in our new home, a beautiful brownstone in the best part of the city, and looked at our bank account. We were millionaires, not just comfortable. Millionaires. I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt happy. And in many ways, I did. I loved my work. I loved Mateo more than ever. We had 2 beautiful children now, a boy and a girl, who filled our home with laughter and chaos. But there was a part of me, a dark, stubborn part, that still thought about that invitation. That still thought about my family. They hadn't come to our elopement. They hadn't come when our son was born. They hadn't come when our daughter arrived 2 years later. They sent cards, polite and distant, and we sent cards back. But the silence between us was a living thing, a chasm that had only grown wider with time. I followed them on social media, a habit I couldn't break. My mom's life looked perfect, as always. Luncheons and galas and charity events. My dad's firm seemed to be doing well. Liam and Chloe had a perfect house and perfect children and perfect vacations. They looked happy. They looked like they had never missed a beat. And I hated them for it. I hated that they had moved on so easily. I hated that they never reached out, never apologized, never acknowledged the pain they had caused. I hated that they were living their perfect lives while I still carried this wound. Mateo noticed. Of course he did. He always noticed. "You're thinking about them again?" he said one night as we sat on our porch watching the city lights twinkle. I didn't deny it. "I can't help it. I see their photos. They're so happy. They don't even think about us." He was quiet for a moment. "Maybe they don't, but that's not your problem, Bianca. Your problem is that you're still letting them live in your head rent-free." I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. "Easy for you to say, they never rejected you." "They rejected you," he said gently. "Which means they rejected me, but I don't need their approval. I never did. I have you. I have our kids. I have more than I ever dreamed of. Why would I waste a single second being angry at people who don't matter?" But they did matter. They were my family. And no matter how successful I became, no matter how much money we had, that wound was still there, festering. I started to plan. Not revenge, not exactly, more like exposure. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to know what they had missed. I wanted them to regret. I started by reaching out to my cousin Sarah. We had stayed in touch over the years, sporadic messages, occasional coffee dates. She was the only member of my extended family who had never judged me, never made me feel less than. We met for lunch at a quiet cafe, and I told her everything. The success, the money, the lingering hurt. She listened, nodding, her eyes sympathetic. "They're struggling, you know," she said quietly. "Your parents." I raised an eyebrow. "Struggling, they look perfect on social media." "They always look perfect on social media," Sarah said. "That's the point, but my mom tells me things. Your dad's firm is in trouble, has been for a while. He hasn't adapted to the new market, and he's losing clients left and right. Your mom is. She's not handling it well. The social circle is expensive to maintain, and the money is running out." I should have felt satisfaction. I should have felt vindication. Instead, I just felt sad. "And Liam?" I asked. Sarah hesitated. "Liam is complicated. He and Chloe are still together, but it's not good. She's become even more demanding, even more critical. He works long hours, comes home to a cold house. I don't think he's happy. I don't think he's been happy for a long time." I thought about my brother, the boy who built forts with me, who taught me to ride a bike. I thought about how far we had drifted, how much we had lost. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I asked. Sarah shrugged. "Would you have wanted to know? Would it have made a difference?" I didn't know, I honestly didn't know. That conversation planted a new seed in my mind. Not revenge, not exposure, but something else. Something I couldn't quite name. A few months later, an opportunity presented itself. A major charity gala was coming up, the biggest event of the season. My mom would be there, of course, chairing the decorations committee. My dad would be there, networking desperately for new clients. Liam and Chloe would be there, smiling their perfect smiles. And I had been invited, not as Bianca Carter, the disappointing daughter, but as Bianca Reyes, co-founder of one of the most successful educational startups in the country, wife of Mateo Reyes, the artist whose murals were now featured in museums. The invitation had come personally from the event's host, a tech billionaire who had commissioned Mateo to paint his entire penthouse. I RSVP'd yes, with pleasure. The night of the gala arrived. I spent hours getting ready, not because I wanted to look beautiful, but because I wanted to look unforgettable. I wore a gown that cost more than my parents' first car. Diamonds sparkled at my ears and throat, a gift from Mateo on our 10th anniversary. My hair was swept up, my makeup flawless. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the girl who had sat on the floor of a tiny apartment clutching a cheap invitation. I saw a woman who had fought for everything she had and won. Mateo stood behind me, handsome in his custom tuxedo. He had filled out over the years, no longer the scrawny artist surviving on coffee and ambition. He was solid, confident, successful, but his eyes were the same. They still looked at me like I was the most precious thing in the world. "You ready for this?" he asked. I took a deep breath. I've been ready for 10 years. The gala was at the city's most exclusive hotel, a glittering ballroom filled with chandeliers and flowers, and the kind of people who graced the covers of magazines. We walked in together and I felt eyes turn toward us. Whispers followed in our wake. "Is that Bianca Carter?" Bianca Reyes now. Her husband is that artist, the one everyone's talking about. I heard they're worth millions. More than millions, darling. Much more. I held my head high and smiled. We made our way through the crowd, stopping to chat with people we knew, people who wanted to know us. I felt like a queen in my own kingdom. And then I saw them. My mother stood near the center of the room, her back to me. She was wearing a gown I recognized from a photo she'd posted online, elegant but not new. Her hair was perfectly styled, her pearls perfectly placed. But something was different. She looked smaller somehow, less imposing. My father stood beside her, his smile fixed and false. He was talking to a group of men, nodding along, but I could see the desperation in his eyes. He was selling himself, and it wasn't working. Liam and Chloe were nearby, a perfect tableau. Chloe was dressed to impress, but there was a hardness around her mouth that hadn't been there before. Liam looked tired. He looked old. I watched them for a long moment, my heart pounding. Then Mateo squeezed my hand. "Go," he said softly. "I'm right here." I walked toward them. My heels clicked on the marble floor, each step a declaration. I stopped right behind my mother and waited. She turned, and when she saw me, her face went pale, then red, then pale again. "Bianca," she breathed. "Hello, Mother." Her eyes traveled over me, taking in the gown, the diamonds, the confidence. I saw the calculations happening behind her eyes, the reassessment, the realization. "You look," she started, then stopped. "Successful," I offered. "Happy, rich." My father turned at the sound of my voice. His mouth dropped open. Liam stared. Chloe's perfect smile froze on her face. "Bianca," my father said, "we didn't know you were coming." "I was invited," I said sweetly, "by the host himself. He's a big fan of my husband's work." Chloe's eyes flicked to Mateo, who had appeared at my side. She looked at his tuxedo, his confident stance, his handsome face. I saw the envy flash in her eyes before she could hide it. "This is my husband," I said, putting my arm through his. "Mateo Reyes, I don't think you've officially met, not properly." Liam stepped forward. His eyes were wet. "Bianca," he said, his voice rough, "I'm so sorry, I should have." "I should have? You should have what?" I asked, my voice cool. "Stood up for me, called me, apologized. It's been 10 years, Liam, 10 years." He flinched. Chloe put a hand on his arm, but he shook it off. "I know," he said, "I know. I was a coward, I let them. I let everyone." He couldn't finish. My mother found her voice. "Bianca, this is hardly the place. Perhaps we could have dinner sometime. Catch up." I laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. "Catch up? You want to catch up?" You haven't spoken to me in 10 years, you didn't come to my wedding, you've never met your grandchildren, and you want to have dinner?" My father stepped forward. "Bianca, things were complicated. You made choices that—" "I made choices," I interrupted. "I chose to marry a man I loved, a man who didn't have money, and you chose to cut me out of your lives because of it. Those were your choices. Not mine." The silence around us was deafening. People were staring. My mother's face was a mask of humiliation. Chloe looked like she wanted to disappear. Liam just looked broken. Mateo's hand found mine and squeezed. I squeezed back. "I didn't come here to fight," I said, my voice softer now. "I came here to show you something. I came here to show you that you were wrong. About me, about him, about us." I looked at each of them in turn. My mother, my father, my brother. The people who had once been my whole world. "I'm not the girl you rejected anymore," I said. "I'm not the one who needs your approval. I have a husband who loves me, children who adore me, and a life that is fuller and richer than anything you could have imagined for me. I don't need you, I don't need anything from you." My mother's eyes filled with tears. Real tears, I think. "Bianca, please." "No," I said. "You don't get to cry now, you don't get to pretend you care. You made your choice 10 years ago, now you get to live with it." I turned to leave, but Liam caught my arm. His grip was gentle, desperate. "Please," he whispered. "I know I don't deserve it, I know I was terrible, but I'm your brother. I love you, I've always loved you, I was just too weak to show it." I looked at him, really looked. I saw the little boy who built forts with me, the teenager who taught me to drive, the man who had let fear and family pressure destroy our relationship. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said honestly. "Not yet, maybe not ever, but I'm willing to try. For the sake of the brother I used to know." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "That's all I ask, just a chance." I looked at Mateo. He smiled, that same smile that had lit up a coffee shop so many years ago. He nodded. "We're having a party next weekend," I said to Liam. "At our home, our children's birthday party. You're invited, you can come or not, it's your choice." I didn't wait for his answer. I turned and walked away, Mateo by my side. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice, high and strained, trying to explain to the curious onlookers. I didn't care. The next week was a whirlwind of preparations. Our twins were turning 5, and we were throwing a party that would make every other party look like a sad picnic. A bouncy castle, a face painter, a magician, enough food to feed an army. Our backyard, which was more like a small park, was decorated with more balloons than I had ever seen. I didn't know if Liam would come. I didn't know if anyone would come, but I had made my peace with it. I had said what I needed to say. Whatever happened next was up to them. The party started at noon. By 12:30, the yard was full of children, shrieking and laughing and running in circles. Mateo's family was there, of course, loud and wonderful and everywhere. My mother-in-law had taken over the kitchen, and my father-in-law was telling stories to anyone who would listen. I was helping a small child with a juice box when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned. Liam stood there, looking nervous and out of place. Behind him, a woman I didn't know held a small child in her arms. She was plain, soft-spoken, with kind eyes and a gentle smile, nothing like Chloe. "Bianca," Liam said, "this is Danielle, my wife, and this is our daughter, Lily." I stared at him. "Your wife, you're married?" He nodded. "Divorced Chloe 2 years ago. It was awful, but it was necessary. Danielle and I met at a support group. She's a kindergarten teacher." A kindergarten teacher, not a lawyer's daughter, not a socialite, a teacher. I looked at Danielle and she smiled at me, a real smile, not a mannequin smile. "I've heard so much about you," she said softly. "Liam talks about you all the time. He misses you terribly." I didn't know what to say. I looked at Liam, and for the first time I saw my brother. Not the polished, perfect version, just my brother. Tired, hopeful, scared. "I didn't know," I said. "About the divorce, about any of it." "I know," he said. "I didn't know how to tell you. I was ashamed. Ashamed of how long it took me to see the truth. Ashamed of how I let Chloe treat you. Ashamed of everything." Our daughter ran up, tugging my sleeve. "Mama, who's that?" I looked at Liam, at Danielle, at little Lily. I made a decision. "This is your Uncle Liam," I said, "and your Aunt Danielle, and your cousin Lily." My daughter's face lit up. "I have a cousin, can she play with me?" I looked at Liam. He was crying again. Danielle was crying too. Even little Lily looked confused but happy. Yeah, I said softly. She can play. The rest of the afternoon was strange and wonderful and terrifying. Liam and Danielle fit into our chaotic family like they had always been there. Danielle helped with the food. Liam played with the children. Lily and our daughter became inseparable, holding hands and running through the sprinklers. At the end of the day, after the last child had gone home and the last balloon had popped, Liam and I sat on the porch steps, watching the sunset. I'm sorry, he said again. I know I've said it before, but I need you to know how sorry I am for everything, for not standing up for you, for letting me lose you. I was quiet for a long moment. It hurt, I said finally, more than anything, not just the wedding, all of it, the way they looked at Mateo, the way they made me feel like I wasn't good enough, the way you let them. I know, he whispered. But you're here now, I said. That counts for something. He looked at me, hope flickering in his eyes. Really? I nodded. Really, it's going to take time, a lot of time, and it's not going to be easy, but we're family. That has to mean something. He hugged me then, tight and desperate, like he was afraid I might disappear. I hugged him back, and for the first time in 10 years, it felt real. My parents didn't come that day. They didn't come the next week or the next month. But 6 months later, an envelope arrived in the mail. Thick, cream-colored, with my name in my mother's perfect cursive. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a letter, handwritten, several pages long. My mother apologized. Truly, deeply apologized. She didn't make excuses. She didn't blame me or Mateo or circumstances. She took responsibility for her choices, for her cruelty, for her obsession with appearances. She told me she was proud of me, proud of what I had built, proud of the woman I had become. She asked if she could meet her grandchildren. She wrote about her own regrets, her own fears. She confessed that she had always been afraid of not being enough, of not having enough, of being looked down upon by the people in her social circle. She had projected those fears onto me, and in doing so, she had lost the person who mattered most. I sat on my porch and cried for an hour. Mateo found me there, the letter in my lap. He sat beside me and read it over my shoulder. When he finished, he pulled me into his arms. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to forgive her. Part of me wants to throw this letter in the trash and never speak to her again. "Both are valid," he said. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." I thought about it for a long time. I thought about the girl who had sat on the floor of a tiny apartment, clutching a cheap invitation. I thought about the woman I had become, strong and successful and loved. I thought about my children and the kind of example I wanted to set for them. In the end, I wrote back. I told my mother that I was willing to try, but that it would be slow and it would be on my terms. I told her that she would have to earn a place in our lives. That trust couldn't be rebuilt overnight. I told her that if she wanted to meet her grandchildren, she would have to accept them as they were, with their loud, chaotic, wonderful family, and never make them feel like they weren't good enough. She agreed. She showed up at our next family dinner, nervous and humble, with a gift for each child and a sincere apology for Mateo. It was awkward and painful and beautiful. My children didn't understand why they had never met this woman before, but they accepted her with the open-hearted grace that only children possess. My father came next, slower to change, but trying. He and Mateo discovered a shared interest in architecture, of all things, and I would sometimes find them deep in conversation, sketching ideas on napkins. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect, but it was real. The last time I saw my mother, we were sitting on my porch, watching our children play in the yard. She looked older now, softer. The armor was gone. "I'm so proud of you," she said. "Not because you're rich, not because you're successful. Because you're you, because you built this life on your own terms, because you taught me what really matters." I reached over and took her hand. "We're both learning, Mom." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "We are." Finally, Mateo appeared in the doorway, our youngest on his hip. "Dinner's ready," he called. "Your famous lasagna, Margaret. I hope you're hungry." My mother laughed, a real laugh. "I'm always hungry for your cooking, Mateo." We walked inside together, 3 generations of family, not perfect, not picture perfect, but real. Finally, truly real. And I thought about that girl again, the one on the floor of the tiny apartment. I thought about how far she had come, how much she had survived, how much she had built. I thought about the revenge she had once dreamed of, the satisfaction of watching her family regret their choices. But this was better. This was so much better. Because revenge would have left me empty. Forgiveness, hard-won and imperfect, filled me up. It gave me back something I thought I had lost forever. My family. Finally, truly mine. 5 years later, I'm sitting on the porch of our brownstone, watching the city come alive in the evening light. The street below is quiet, tree-lined, nothing like the cramped apartment we started in. Our children are in the backyard, their laughter floating up to me on the warm breeze. Mateo is inside, finishing dinner with my mother. They've become quite the team in the kitchen, trading recipes and stories. My father is here too, sitting in the chair beside me. He comes every Sunday now, without fail. He brings sketches sometimes, showing me his latest projects. His firm never recovered, but he doesn't seem to mind. He works for a small nonprofit now, designing affordable housing. He says it's the most fulfilling work he's ever done. Liam and Danielle just arrived, their daughter Lily running straight for the backyard to find our twins. Danielle is pregnant again, due in the spring. My mother is already knitting. She knits for everyone now, blankets and booties and tiny sweaters. It's become her thing. We sit on the porch, my father and I, watching the families walk by, listening to the sounds of the city. I never thought we'd be here, he says quietly. After everything that happened, I never thought you'd give us a second chance. I look at him, at the gray in his hair, the lines around his eyes, the softness that has replaced the old hardness. You're my father, I say simply. That never stopped being true. He nods, his eyes wet. I don't deserve you. Maybe not, I say, but you're here, that's what matters. Mateo calls us to dinner. We gather around the table, too many people for the space, but no one minds. My mother passes the lasagna. My father tells a story about his latest project. Liam laughs at something Danielle whispers in his ear. The children squabble over the breadsticks. I look around the table at all these faces. The faces that once excluded me, the faces that once broke my heart, the faces that now make up my entire world. And I think about that cheap, thin invitation, the one that started it all. I think about the hurt, the anger, the years of silence. I think about the revenge I planned, the satisfaction I imagined. But this is better. This is so much better. Because revenge would have been empty. Forgiveness, hard-won and imperfect, filled me up. It gave me back something I thought I had lost forever. My daughter tugs my sleeve. Mama, why are you smiling? I look at her father across the table, at the family gathered around us. Because I'm happy, baby, I say. Because I'm so happy. She grins, showing off the gap where she lost her first tooth last week. Mateo catches my eye and smiles that smile, the one that still makes my heart skip after all these years. This is my family. This is my life. This is my story, and it's only just beginning.